So I think it is recording, so we should be good there. Welcome to everyone who was able to be here in person and join us online for our Club Leader Development Series December edition, where we're going to talk about finances. So thank you all again for joining us, and we are going to get started. For those of you joining online, if you have any questions at any time, feel free to type them in the chat box. If you're here and you have questions, feel free to raise your hand as we go through. As a reminder, we're going to start with our mission and vision of 4-H, which is to provide real-life educational opportunities that develop young people who will have a positive impact in their communities and their world. We start all of our Club Leader Development series with this because it's a reminder of why we do 4-H and where we want to be. And so everything that we do hopefully reflects this mission of 4-H. So tonight's agenda, we're going to look at financial guidelines for club leaders. We're going to review some financial paperwork that you as club leaders are responsible for. We're going to go over fundraising in 4-H, some general finance guideline reminders, and proper use of the 4-H name and emblem and the Clover. And then at the end, we will have, like we have in the past, resources for club leaders, links to websites, that sort of stuff to help you guys, as well as a time for questions. So up first is financial guidelines. So these are taken pretty much straight from our policies and procedures handbook. As 4-H educators, every year we get updates from the state 4-H office, and they combine state updates, national updates, and we have policies that we need to make sure that we're following at the county level. So these come from that, and they are a reminder for you guys, financial guidelines for you as clubs. So to maintain a record of its activities, so the club is required to have a record of what it does throughout the year, and you do need to submit those meeting dates, activity dates to the extension office as soon as you know them, so we can promote them so that we're aware of what 4-H functions are going on. You need to maintain a record of contributions that clubs receive and any expenses you incur. So also keeping a budget is important. Keep a file and a record of its financial transactions. So again, going back to that, what comes in, what goes out, that type of stuff as a club. And make sure you're updating your club on your finances at each meeting. So most clubs should have a treasurer, and this is a great opportunity to work with youth to give them an insight into how club finances work. So having them report on the financial standing of the club at each meeting is very much encouraged. Make sure you are filing all the necessary federal and state forms, such as the IRS 990 E-Postcard, which we'll talk about later. And you do need to make sure you're submitting an annual financial report to the extension educator, which is me. And you will get mailings on all of that. We're going to go over some of that paperwork tonight. But a lot of this information is going to be repeated, especially over the upcoming months, because we do have some deadlines coming up. So this is just a reminder of some financial guidelines we have for clubs, the things that we're required to do per Purdue state 4-H and national 4-H guidelines. So one of the things I mentioned was keeping track of the activities that you do. Tonight and online, we will have posted an activity report form. Tonight it's yellow. This is a sample of what you could turn into the office. We would encourage you to have any meetings, activities that you have turned in. It does not have to be in this form. This is just a sample activity report form. This is also really nice to have with your finances whenever you are reviewing them at the end of the year, because then when you get audited, which we'll talk about later, the council committee can go back and say, oh, okay, we see that you had a meeting on the 23rd of December and it was a pizza party. And then if your financial records show that, it's a nice way to kind of compare the activities you're doing to the finances you're reporting. So this is nice to have with your finances, but we do need to know what is going on in your club as soon as possible every year so that we can make sure we're promoting, and it just keeps us in the loop as well. Next, we're going to talk about our club financial checklist. And this is sent every year with our financial information out to our club leaders. So make sure you're keeping an eye out for this. This is put together through the state 4-H office. And just to go over a couple of the things on there, this is what you need to have or should have as a 4-H club related to finances. So if you go through here and you're reading this and you're a little nervous because maybe you don't meet one or two of the guidelines, don't panic. Let me know, and we're going to work through what we can to make sure that you're meeting all of these guidelines. So some things that you need to make sure happen is that you don't have a personal social security number on your checking account, checking or savings account that your club may have. Make sure that you have a unique EIN number that has been obtained for the group. All of our clubs have one of those. Again, if you have any questions related to that, let me know and we can make sure that gets clarified. The checking account should have a duplicate check system. That's great for record keeping and going back and looking at things as well. Also, make sure the checking account has 2 signatures of unrelated people. I know we do have some clubs where club leaders are related, so it's really important to find that second person that can be part of your leadership that can help be on the checking account if you choose to have a checking account for your club. A list of receipts and expenses is maintained. Original receipts are kept. Treasurer's report given at each club meeting. Again, great way to get kids involved because this is a youth organization. And then have a financial report completed every year, and then make sure you file your 990 E-Postcard every year. We're going to go through some of those in more detail as well. Welcome if you want to grab one of everything. Yeah. Next. Okay, next we have our financial report. So this is something all club leaders also need to fill out yearly. So this is something that will be sent to you. Actually, it'll be sent pretty soon this month. We're hoping that we can get everything back by February. So every club is supposed to fill out a financial report every year. 20% of our clubs every year, at least 20% of our clubs every year, get audited or reviewed with a financial committee on 4-H Youth Council. Still need to turn one of these in, even if you don't have an active treasury. So even if for whatever reason you do not have money that your club uses, there is a place for you to fill this out. So I'm just going to take this and kind of go step by step so everybody's on the same page. The first part is really just information about your club, telling us about where your bank, where your money is housed, whether that's the bank, whether that's 4-H Youth Council. We are not bank specific, so it can be any bank. We just ask that you let us know where your money is being housed. And then the middle section there, a lot of those blanks are going to be filled in because it'll talk about deadlines, when it should be into Hendricks County, who does it, who does the audits, those sort of things will be there. And then the middle section talks about your checking and savings account balances. So you should start with a balance and end with a balance. And you can have, this is sort of the generic overview of your checking and savings account. When it comes to it, you should be able to provide financial records of everything that happens in between. So this isn't a complete breakdown, but you should be able to provide, if asked, a complete breakdown of income and expenses for the year, especially if you're going to be one of the clubs that goes through the financial review with the 4-H Youth Council Committee. And then you should have your treasurer sign as well as you sign as club leader. Again, this is a great opportunity to educate our 4-Hers about what happens with finances in a 4-H club. And like I said before, if you don't have an active treasury, that's not a problem, but you still need to submit one of these reports. At the bottom, there's a place for you to check mark and still sign that you do not have an active treasury. Again, still needs to be submitted to us. So that we can have record of this, and we keep a copy in our office at all times. I always try and send out, when this information gets mailed out to club leaders, an example as well. So I do have here, and we will upload online as well, an example of a filled in financial report, so that way you have something to refer back to. And if you have any questions at any time, please feel free to reach out to our office to get those answered. So I mentioned club audits, financial reviews. It is policy that 20% of our clubs at least are reviewed every year. This year in 2020, they're going to be the 18th and 19th. The clubs that are getting audited / reviewed were listed in the newsletter, and they will be getting specific letters about how the review is going to work, when it is, time, everything like that as well. Very, very soon. We're hoping by next week to get everything sent out. And the way this works is we have a youth council committee that sits down. We really encourage club leaders to be there. Treasurers are welcome to be a part of the conversation, again, so that youth are being involved in this. And the council pretty much sits down and compares your checklist, your records of expenses, your receipts. They sort of spot check, make sure everything looks like it's on the up and up. This is not to punish people. So if for whatever reason a club doesn't check all of the yes boxes that are supposed to be yes boxes, this is an opportunity for us to make sure our club leaders know how we can improve and make sure we're still continuing to follow policies. So if something isn't checked, this is a good way for us to say, here's what needs to be improved for the next time that we meet. So we are happy to, again, work through all of this. We've got a great council committee that helps go through all of this, and it's really an educational opportunity for club leaders to sort of make sure they are on the right track with financial guidelines. Questions about that so far? Good. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about EIN, which is our employer identification number. This number is special to each club, and it is through the IRS. Way back when clubs were first established, you had to apply for this number through the IRS. And if we wanted to start a new club, we still have a process we have to go through to get this number. And this allows clubs to have a federal tax exemption. That means that they do not have to pay federal sales tax, but they still have to pay state sales tax. So if you are going to Walmart and are buying crafts for your club to do for the nursing home, you still need to make sure you're paying that sales tax at Walmart. This does allow clubs, though, to apply for like grants and money through organizations that donate to or give money to tax-exempt organizations. So, for example, if there was a grant out there and a club wanted to, we're going to pick on Dog Club. If Dog Club wanted to purchase, let's say, equipment and they had a grant that they were writing, they can apply because of this federal tax exemption number, but they do have to still go through our office. So I still, as 4-H educator, have to be aware of the request that's out there, of the funding request, because I have to work with Purdue to get the actual letter that says you are a tax-exempt organization, this is your official EIN number, and here's the proof that most organizations are going to need to file those grants or that money request. So it's really important that we keep our EINs up to date because of all of those reasons, because we want to have you guys be able to be federally tax exempt and be able to do things as a tax exempt organization. One of the ways that is most important to keep that number up to date is filing your IRS 990 in E-Postcard. So this has to happen by May 15th every single year. And it's really, really easy. It is all done electronically, and it's literally like 3 questions that they ask. We send every year for the past couple of years, we have sent step-by-step instructions to our leaders with screenshots very similar to what you see on the screen. And we also have it, we will have it online. We'll make sure we have it on your club leader page this year when it comes out, when the new one comes out for 2020. This is super important to do because if you do not file, you risk losing that federal tax exemption status. So making sure you file is very, very important. And we also request that we get a copy of the status. So not just that you have filed, but that you have gone back in and seen what your status is. Sometimes it is active, and that's awesome. That's what we want to see. So once you submit, it might take a little while, but we really want to see that active status. But there is a chance that it might come back rejected. Don't panic, but let me know, because then we have to start asking questions as to what made it be rejected so that we can make sure we're fixing it for the next year. So again, super important. If you leave knowing one thing at this training, please know to file your IRS 990. And again, it has to be done by May 15th. That information typically comes out in the spring, and we are happy to offer computer and walk you through here at the Extension office if you ever need help doing this postcard. So next we're going to talk about fundraising. Before I move on, are there any questions about just the general financial guidelines, the paperwork that we went over? Okay. So fundraising. Yay, raising funds. It's great. We want to have clubs that, can go out and do stuff, can go be a part of the community, but that does require funds from time to time. But fundraising should not be the main objective for clubs. We are here to educate. We are here to give kids the opportunity to grow and learn and be an active part of the community. But our major focus should not be fundraising. When we do fundraisers, they should be raised for a very specific purpose. So it shouldn't just be to raise funds so that we have a ton of money in our account and we can say that we have a ton of money in our account. We should be doing them for specific purposes. Any fundraising program that uses the 4-H name and emblem must be conducted in compliance with federal guidelines. So 4-H is very particular on ways we can and can't do fundraising, and we're going to talk about those a little bit coming up, but just making sure you as club leaders are aware that I as a 4-H educator need to be aware of what fundraising is happening within your clubs. That's a big part of this, and we'll solve a lot of issues down the road if there's ever questions raised about how funds are raised. So the first thing is funding activities need to be approved by the County Extension Service. 4-H Youth Development Extension Educator, that's me. And they should always follow proper policy. So we do have a county fundraiser right now available to all clubs. And it's our flower sales. They take place in the spring. We've got geraniums. We did geraniums and petunias, I think are our two. And we also do poinsettias in the winter. These are not mandatory fundraisers, though. This is not the only way your club has to raise money. We encourage it, and I strongly encourage your club to take part of this fundraiser, though, because a portion of those funds goes into the 4-H Youth Council, and that money is used to send kids on trips. It's used to do awards for the Achievement Banquet, and it's used to help do a lot of the other programming that we do in Hendricks County 4-H. So it really does help the overall 4-H program. Plus, 4-H clubs get 10% of those profits that they raise. So if your club sells a lot of flowers and makes a lot of money, you guys can get 10% of that back, and that's going to help you as well as help send other kids in the 4-H program on trips and provide other 4-H opportunities as well. Again, you do not have to do this one. If you would want to do something else, you just need to have a conversation with me, and we need to make sure it's meeting all of the guidelines. And those guidelines are available on one of the links on the last slide, and we'll talk about a little bit here today. I will upload what I have as well for those of you online, what we have, the financial guidelines as well. So some fundraising no-nos. We should not be raising funds with games of chance, which games of chance are defined as risking money or other property for gain, contingent in whole or in part upon luck, chance, or the operation of a gambling device. For example, we should not be having bingo to raise money. We should not be doing lotteries or 50-50 raffles. We should not be doing anything that would cause a game of chance. To clarify, I'm not saying don't ever play bingo in your clubs. You can have fun. Bingo is a game. We get it. We have played what we call human bingo in junior leaders, where it's a get-to-know-you type of activity. We also call it human scavenger hunt. But you should not be having the kids buy in. You should not be charging to play bingo. Bingo is a game of chance, but we are not trying to raise money by playing bingo. Also, we should not be doing any online fundraising. So things like GoFundMe, Amazon Smile, those types of things have been increasingly popular in the world, and they are not an approved way to raise funds currently within the 4-H program. Some more no-nos. We should not be using nor collecting money from debit or credit cards. So debit and credit cards are not approved methods for 4-H clubs to make financial transactions. So clubs should not own debit cards, nor should they be purchasing stuff with them, nor should they accept debit card transactions, credit cards from other people. If you're, selling t-shirts or flowers, you should not be using credit cards to take that information. And you should not also use online payment portals. So things like Eventbrite, PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, you as a club unit should not be accepting money that way. Questions about that? No? Okay. What you should be doing, though, is providing receipts for your donation or funds received. So people who donated to 4-H may be eligible to deduct the contributions on their taxes. So I did include an example of a receipt here that we will also upload online. And this is just a very generic one. It does not have to be this specific, but it's a good, it is a very good basic one, because you could add something in there related to your club, maybe how your club would use the money if you're able to, but it is important to include the date and how much they donated. So again, good practices would be to have receipts for people that donate to your club. Questions about that before we move on to our just basic guidelines? Okay. Next, we're going to just talk about some general financial guidelines, and we're going to go over Clover usage. So some financial guidelines, again, these are straight from our policies handbook to make sure that we are all on the same page. 4-H is a public organization. Therefore, all funds raised in the name of 4-H are 4-H property intended to benefit all the members. That means no single person owns the money, not the treasurer, not the leader, not one person individually. Funds need to be deposited promptly after they have been received. That just takes out a lot of risk management, so that you're not having, if you're selling lots and lots of flowers and your club is raising lots of money, you're not having thousands of dollars sitting around just ripe for the picking. We want to make sure that money is kept safe so that it doesn't lead you to be questioned as a club leader. Receipts should be provided, and budgets should be created and approved by the club. So again, going back to including youth in that discussion about financial guidelines, work with your treasurer, work with your officer team to create a budget to present to the rest of the club. Financial reports do need to be given at each club meeting if possible. That also means it needs to make it into the minutes, just for good documentation. And whenever you're doing fundraising, especially when it is related to 4-H, the Clover must be used properly, which we're going to talk about next. So using the 4-H name and emblem, when fundraising with the 4-H Clover, be sure the Clover and 4-H name are used correctly. So I joke that part of my job gets to be a Clover cop, but I'm only half kidding on that. We just want to make sure we are very protective of our 4-H name and emblem because it has such high meaning. So we want to make sure, again, we are using proper standards, proper policies to follow when we're going about and asking for money on behalf of the 4-H program in Hendricks County. So the Clover should always receive approval to use. So if you are going to be making t-shirts to sell, or you want to go out and say, we're selling these thingamabobs to raise money, but we are the 4-H Club of Hendricks County, the name 4-H, the Clover, those are all going to be used as you are out trying to raise funds. So I need to be aware of that to make sure, one, it's done appropriately, two, the Clover's being used appropriately, so that we can make sure we're keeping we're keeping the 4-H mission in mind, going back to that, and making sure we're doing things the way that we are allowed to do them. So never use to imply endorsement. So that doesn't mean that if you're selling this Hujama watch it for money and it has been approved, that doesn't mean that your club endorses the selling of that. So just because we sell flowers doesn't mean we necessarily endorse that grower or that group that we get the flowers from. We are just using them as a catalyst to sort of raise our funds. And it should always be used properly. So don't distort, flip, change the color, anything like that. I did also print out, and I will also, again, upload. This is from the USDA and NIFA National 4-H. These are their specific guidelines. So these are what we also have to follow as 4-H educators, and what leaders, clubs, groups within the 4-H program should also be following. So things like the H's on the green clover can be white, black, or metallic gold. So you shouldn't be changing the color of the clover or the H's. The H's on the black clover should be white, and the H's on the white clover can be black or green. So again, very specific guidelines. And if there's any questions, again, that's where you as a club leader will have a conversation with me, and we'll make sure that we are meeting all appropriate guidelines. So the next 2 slides also are from National 4-H in this document as well, and they talk about some examples of how you should and should not use the clover. So use the whole emblem. Make sure that it is there entirely, especially those itty bitty numbers on the bottom. You might not think that those are important, but those are actually one of the most important things about the clover, because that's what helps protect it as an emblem. Do not remove any of the leaves, cover it in any sort of way. Try and superimpose something over the top of the leaves. And you shouldn't even cut off the leaves. So the whole clover in its entirety should be able to be seen. Don't place text or other images over the top of the 4-H emblem. So there's some examples there of an approved one and a not approved one. Make sure it is kept upright. It should not ever be shifted or changed positions. It always should be straight up and down. And it shouldn't ever be distorted or unproportional to what it's designed to be. So again, there's some examples there. So if you're doing, again, shirts, hats, something in your club to raise money, even if it's not to raise money and you're just doing it for your club, I still do need to check that and make sure that these guidelines are being met. So please make sure you reach out and double check anything that would have the 4-H name and emblem on there with me before you send it to a printer. So a couple other resources I have tonight. The Hendricks County 4-H Leader page, that is where these webinars are being housed. They'll take you to a YouTube channel, but it is also where all of our documents are going. So we try within the next week or so, we will have all of these documents updated on the Leader page for your review. And the financial stuff is actually also going to be coming out hard copy in the mail too. You'll also probably get an email, because this is some important stuff coming up. This is a link to the name and emblem book that I mentioned that has some fundraising guidelines, as well as the visual aids for the graphics. And then, again, be sure you're checking your mail for important financial information coming up soon. We will be sending financial report information. We'll be getting in touch with a reminder to the clubs that are getting audited this coming February, to make sure we have a game in place of what that's going to look like, what your schedule is, who's coming, and all of our financial stuff we're asking to have turned in by those February deadlines as well. So even if you're not getting a financial review, we're asking your clubs to get wrap up the end of the year stuff and have things to us by the middle of February, so we can make sure we get documentation and move on. And I think, yep, that is it for tonight. It's a little shorter presentation, but at this time, are there any questions? I'm going to stop my recording. All right.